So let me do a consciousness raiser on this. Imagine that you are a bloodhound dog. So your whole world is about smelling. You've got this very large snout. You have 200 million scent receptors in here. You have wet nostrils that attract and trap scent molecules. You have slits in your nostril, so you can take big, giant nosefuls of air. You have floppy ears to kick up more scent. So everything for you is about smelling. It's your whole world. So one day you're walking along behind your master, and you stop in your tracks with a revelation, and you look at your master's nose, and you think, what is it like to have the pitiful little nose of a human? How could you not know that there's a cat 100 yards away? Or how could you not know that your best friend was on this very spot 6 hours ago? But because we're humans, we are used to our Umwelt. It's not like we have some sense that we're missing something. We're used to the reality that we have. We accept the reality that we're given. But the question is, do we have to be stuck in our Umwelt? And so as a neuroscientist, what I'm interested in is the way that our technology might expand our Umwelt and how that's going to change the experience of being human. So what many of you probably know is that there are hundreds of thousands of people walking around now with artificial hearing and artificial vision. So the way this works is with a cochlear implant, you take a microphone, you slip an electrode strip into the inner ear, and you feed in this digitized signal into the inner ear. And the way it works with a retinal implant is that you have a digital camera, and that feeds into an electrode grid that plugs into the back of your eye. Now, this works, but what's interesting is that as recently as maybe 20 years ago, there were a lot of neuroscientists who thought this wouldn't work. And the reason is because these things speak the language of Silicon Valley, and that's not exactly the same dialect as your natural biological sense organs. And so they thought the brain's not going to be able to understand these digital signals. But as it turns out, it works just fine. People plug these things in, and they figure out how to be able to perceive with them. Now, how do we understand that? It's because, here's the big secret, your brain is not directly hearing or seeing any of this. Your brain is locked in a vault of silence and darkness, and all it ever sees are electrochemical signals. And that's it. So it has all these different cables that are plugged into it that are bringing signals in. It doesn't know what those are. It has no idea what we would even mean by eyes or ears or nose or fingertips. All it knows is there's data coming in. And what the brain is very good at doing is extracting patterns and assigning meaning to those and building your entire subjective world out of that. But the key thing is that your brain doesn't know, and it doesn't care where the data is coming from. It just figures out what it's going to do with it. And this is really an extraordinary machine. Essentially, you can think about this like a general purpose compute device. And there's a lot of talk in Silicon Valley and here about AI and all the great things that it's doing. But in fact, we can't even scratch the surface yet of a system like this that just figures out all of the sensory information and figures out how to correlate senses with each other and correlate that with your motor movement and just make this world around you. So the point is, what I think a general purpose device like this allows for is that once Mother Nature has figured out these principles once, then she can mess around with the input channels. She doesn't have to figure out the principles of brain operation every time. And so this is what I call the pH model of evolution. And I don't want to get too technical here, but pH stands for potato head. And I use this name to emphasize that all these sensors that we know and love, these are just peripheral plug-and-play devices. You stick them in, and you're good to go. The brain just figures out what it's going to do with that information. And what's cool is that when you look across the animal kingdom, you find lots of different peripheral devices that can be plugged in, even though the brains across different animals all use the same principles. So just as an example, with snake, you've got these heat pits. That's how it detects the infrared. And with the black ghost knifefish that I mentioned, its body is covered with these electroreceptors by which it picks up these perturbations in the electrical field. The star-nosed mole has this funny nose with 22 fingers on it with which it feels out the tunnels that it's boring through in the dark. And that's how it constructs a three-dimensional representation of its tunnel world. Birds this was just discovered last month, have cryptochromes, which allow them to detect the magnetic field of the Earth. I mean, the fact that they could tell the magnetic field has been known for a long time, but it was just discovered how they do it. But cows have this. Insects, most insects have this. They're all aligned with the magnetic field, so it's called magnetoreception. So the idea here that I've proposed is that Mother Nature doesn't have to continually redesign the brain with each animal. Instead, all she's doing is redesigning peripheral devices to pick up on information sources from the world. You plug it in, and you're good to go. So the lesson that surfaces here is that there's nothing really special or fundamental about the senses that we happen to come to the table with. It's just what we happen to have inherited from a long road of evolution.